I've been wanting to do a video like this for a long time where I start doing tier lists for certain bands just because I'm always getting questions about, where do you rank this? Where do you rank this? And it felt like the best and most logical place to start would be with Blank, obviously. I couldn't really do that until recently because I hadn't listened to Nine yet because I disliked California so much. But I've listened to Nine. I've already given that full review, but I'm going to jump into here chronologically and just start placing stuff where I see fit. So we're going to start with Fly Swatter. It's more or less a demo from very early days, and I do not listen to this album pretty much at all. I've heard it through maybe once or twice. I refreshed my memory on it just this morning, and it just doesn't hold up. There's some ideas in there that, obviously turned into something that was used later, but for the most part, you can barely hear anything, and it's just not an enjoyable listening experience to me. I feel like logically it makes sense to put it in F tier. That's not to say that it's, the worst thing I've ever heard, but I just feel like in context of this list and everything that's on here, it just makes sense to put it here because I never want to listen to it ever, pretty much. And I don't know. I just don't feel like it has many redeeming qualities at all. Next is the Buddha demo. I'm pretty sure there's a couple different versions of Buddha out there, but I'm just going to talk about Buddha in general. There's obviously a lot more going for this album than there was on Fly Swatter. The production is certainly much better. You can hear the vocals. Everything's a bit clearer, but it is still very, very old school sounding. Their voices are very immature. Some of the songs are, quite honestly, some of my least favorite. I've said this quite a few times, but Strings is probably, at least up until some of the stuff from like California 9 came out, it was my least favorite song. But there's a lot of good ones on here, and I especially love that cover of Girl Next Door. I always forget. Is it Girl Next Door or Family Next Door? I forget. But it's the one that was Screeching Weasel, I'm pretty sure. That one's got a really great riff in it, and I don't know, it's great to listen to. And there's other great songs on there, too. So, yeah, it's definitely a better album than Fly Swatter, but I wouldn't really say it's one of those albums that I want to go to very often. But I do enjoy it. Carousel's a good one, too. But I'm going to put it in C tier right now. I don't think that most people would really argue with me on that one, unless you're like a diehard, only early Blink-182 person. But I don't know. I think in the context of everything that's going to come, I think it will make sense. Next up, Cheshire Cat. It's moving in in the right direction. I think it is a step up from Buddha. There are some shared songs between the two albums, but for the most part, I would say that they're better. Plus, there's a bunch of new songs on here that are really solid. Wasting Time is a great song. M&M's is a great song. This version of Carousel is very good. Yeah, I don't know. There's a bunch of really good ones. I'm not gonna talk too much about each individual song on each album, but there's a lot of winners on here. But again, it still lacks in production. The guitar tones, bass tones, all of that isn't really there yet. But I feel like it is definitely better than Buddha, but I still would put it in the category of albums that I don't really want to listen to all that often. So I'm going to keep it in the C tier as well as Buddha, but I'm going to put it ahead of Buddha. I do think it is better. I can't quite put it in B tier. I would give it like a C+, maybe B-, but I'm not really going to ride that line too hard. But it's a good album. It's got some good stuff, and it definitely is an important album for the band for sure. Next, I want to put the EP They Came to Conquer Uranus on here, just because it would be a shame not to, because there's only 3 songs on there: Wrecked Him, Zulu, and Waggy. Waggy is the only one that ended up making it onto a official, like, full-length album, and it's a damn shame, because the other 2 songs are some of their best in terms of early Blink, and great guitar. Even the version of Waggy on there is really solid. It's a good one. And I don't know. It's a really solid 3 songs. It's only like, what, 10 minutes or something long. I forget. But it's solid. It's definitely solid. It's better than Cheshire Cat in just the sense that those 3 songs are just so good, when, you know, a couple on Cheshire and Buddha aren't quite to that level. So just as a package, I feel like I have to put it in B tier. Probably a low B, but we'll see where it ends up compared to some of the other ones. But yeah, those 3 songs are really, really good. It's criminal that they didn't make it onto Dude Ranch. The 2 that weren't anyway. But Waggy is one of my favorites. Next, I want to talk about Dude Ranch. And Dude Ranch is one of those albums that has really changed a lot for me in terms of ranking over the years. I would probably have ranked it much lower in in my past. Some of you may or may not know, I'm sure a lot of you do, I did own one of Tom DeLonge's Gibson Les Pauls that he used around that time, and that just really made me want to re-explore that album when I got the guitar, and it really gave me a newfound inspiration for that album, and it's really a big step up from Cheshire Cat and even from Uranus. And I feel like it was foolish of me to not really give it enough of a chance early in my YouTube career, I guess. It's a very, very solid album. I'm going to have to put it in a high A right now. I can't quite give it a perfect S tier, because I think the only thing really holding it back is that their vocals aren't quite matured yet. They're still a little nasally, Tom especially. And I feel like once Enema came into the picture, his vocals really started to shape up in a very positive way. But it's very, very much on the S-A line. It's a very, very good album. As far as early Blink, I don't think it really gets much better than this. So many good songs. I mean, it's hard to pick a bad song on that album, if there even is one. I mean, some people might say maybe Degenerate, but I feel like it's still a fun song. But yeah, so many bangers. So many. Next, I want to talk about Enema of the State. You know, I have to put this at S tier. I have to. It's not my favorite album of theirs, but it's got to be the most important pop punk album of all time, you know, realistically. You could argue that maybe like Dookie from Green Day would surpass that, but I feel like Enema is a little bit more polished and a little bit more pop punk than Dookie is. I mean, I really don't like to argue genre specifics, but I feel like it defined a genre pretty immediately, and everyone wanted to sound like that. And Dookie was a fantastic album, but it was still more punk than pop. And I feel like Blink's album was a perfect mix of both. I feel like it was a little bit more accessible to the pop listener, while still being very much, you know, punk influenced. Whereas I feel like if you weren't already into punk and that sort of stuff, the Green Day album might be a little bit harder to grasp, I guess. But yeah, it's one of the most important pop punk albums, if not number one. Every song is a banger from front to back. There is not a bad song on this album. It is a non-skip album for me. Absolutely perfect. Next, I do want to include the Mark, Tom, and Travis show because I do think it is a very important album for Blink. I would love it if they would put out another live album. I really like it when bands put out multiple live albums. One of my favorite bands, or actually my favorite band of all time, Rush, they've put out probably like at least 10 live albums because they found it really important to kind of showcase the sound that they had during different eras of their working careers. You know, they had a live album from like 76, I think. I think that was their first one, All the World's a Stage. Then they had one in 81. And then they had one in like 87 or something, or 89. You know, they had a bunch. And it's really great to hear that progression. And I love Mark, Tom, and Travis show. It is a great, great album. I obviously know that it's not 100% just the raw live sound. I know that they touched it up in the studio, and I don't really care because the energy is still there, the banter is still there, the songs are still solid. And when I first discovered that album when I was like 13 or something, I wore that thing out. It was absolutely awesome. And if it wasn't for that album, I probably wouldn't like the really early stuff as much as I do, because I went to that album specifically because I preferred that the live versions of Pathetic, of Untitled, of Damn It, of Carousel. Like I really liked the faster versions of those songs, and the production on that live album is just immaculate. It's such a good album. So I have to give it an A tier. I'm not going to put it as good as Dude Ranch. Just out of respect for Dude Ranch, I feel like Dude Ranch just as a whole is better. But Mark, Tom, and Travis show is a legendary live album, in my opinion, especially for the punk scene. And plus you get Man Overboard, which is a killer new song. So, I mean, what more could you ask for? Next, I'm going to do Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Another super solid album. It was probably my favorite album for a very long time as a young guitar player, and it just has the riffs. So many catchy riffs, so many catchy vocal melodies, you know, you name it. The production on it is, again, like Enema of the State, perfect. You know, Jerry Finn and those guys were just nailing it. Rest in peace. But there are some songs that I do find skippable to me, especially Shut Up. I don't love that song. I never have. That being said, there are some incredible B-sides. Don't Tell Me It's Over, Time to Break Up, What Went Wrong, and there's even a handful of joke songs on there. Those are fun too. But even if it has a skippable song, it's still an incredible album. I have to give it an A tier. I can't quite give it that S tier because I don't feel like it's 100% solid from front to finish, but it's way up there. So I'm going to give it an A. I'm just going to put it behind Mark, Tom, and Travis show just because I feel like with Shut Up on there, it's just that little bit. It's that little bit that it needs. It's not quite, in my opinion, as perfect as I might have thought it was originally. Next up, I want to talk about Untitled. If you've been following me for a while, this should not surprise you. This is my favorite Blink album. Everybody says, you know, whatever album came out when you were 13, that's going to be the album that you're always talking about. And in this case, it was right. But they absolutely nailed it, in my opinion. The production is incredible. The maturity that they showed between Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and here was a huge leap and a huge risk. And I really think they stuck the landing
on everything. The only song on here that I don't absolutely love is just the interlude anyway, which is still a cool thing. I don't skip it. I think it's cool, but it's not really a full song in my opinion, and I don't really love interludes in general. My God, Feeling This is still a huge song for them. Obvious with the baritone guitars. Absolutely love that song. I Miss You is a huge song for them. Asthenia, Always was amazing. It showed that they were really good with the 80s vibe stuff. I mean, everything is incredible on it. So it is an S tier, and it is my number one. Okay, after this one is Neighborhoods. Now, Neighborhoods I've talked in length about, but the biggest gripe I have with Neighborhoods is that it felt disconnected. Even though there are some very good songs on here, it just felt like Mark wrote a bunch of songs and Tom wrote a bunch of songs. They didn't really collaborate on those songs very much at all, and they put them on an album and released it. That being said, there's a lot of good songs on here. Ghost on the Dance Floor, After Midnight, Hearts All Gone is a really good one. There's plenty of solid songs on here, but because it doesn't feel as collaborative, I have to put it in B. I'm going to put it ahead of They Came to Conquer Uranus. I do think it is better, but yeah, it's middle of the road for me. I know a lot of people will probably be upset about that. This could be the album that maybe got you into Blink, and that does happen. It's probably their most divisive album, for sure. And I do like it a lot, but it is a B tier for me. Next, I want to talk about the EP Dogs Eating Dogs. This was a bit of a return to form, in my opinion. It felt more collaborative compared to Neighborhoods. That being said, there were some goofy parts on here. At this point, Angels and Airwaves had already been a thing, and I felt like that showed some influence on songs like Disaster. Then there's the song Boxing Day, which is very different, kind of folky almost. It's not bad, but it's usually a skip for me. It's not my favorite. Probably the only other thing I don't love about the album is Yellow Wolf's guest spot on Pretty Little Girl. Otherwise, I love that song. That is absolutely one of my favorite songs, except for that part, which is a shame. I used to listen to an edited version of that, which just cut his part out altogether. But the other two songs on the album, the title track and When I Was Young, amazing songs. I really like them. So I have to give it a B, just because it's not a super solid package, but the good songs on there and the good parts on there are some of the best that they've done, in my opinion. So balancing that all out, I think it's worth giving it a B, just slightly better than Neighborhoods. Now I want to talk a little bit about California. I was very optimistic about this album when it came out. I do love Matt Skiba as a songwriter, but I've expressed this many times. I do not love him in Blink. I felt like it was the wrong choice. And even though this album did not feel like it had any of his presence at all, I don't feel like he had any songwriting credit on it. I mean, maybe technically he does, but it did not feel like he had any input, when in the next album he definitely did, obviously. But this one just felt very overproduced, thanks to Feldman, John Feldman, the producer. Mark, I felt like, was trying really hard to get those younger fans back, and the whole thing just felt disingenuous, and it just felt more pop than punk, and I don't know. It's not completely terrible, but it's really not good. It's really not. So I have to give it a D tier, just because, at least compared to Fly Swatter, it is somewhat listenable. I can actually hear what's going on, but I really don't like what I hear. Next up is 9, and I did a full review on this one recently, like I said. It has a song on there that I actually liked. I actually added it to my my library, believe it or not. I can't for the life of me remember what the name of that song was off the top of my head, but I talk about it in that review. But it's a little bit more adventurous. It was promising, and some of it absolutely flopped. I still don't love Skiba in Blink, but I don't know. It's definitely not as bad as California, but it's still a D tier for me. It really doesn't even compare to Cheshire Cat or Buddha or anything like that. So I have to also give that a D, but I'm going to put it above or ahead of California. And I'm not really going to talk about California Deluxe because I don't even really care to. I mean, California was such a dud to me that them adding a couple more songs to it wasn't going to save that album for me. So,
And finally, I'm going to talk about one more time. Again, I've talked a lot about this one recently, so I'm going to keep it fairly brief. Tom is back in the band. Very happy about that. Any bit of Tom being in the band is going to be better than without Tom in the band, basically, except for Fly Swatter. But there's a lot of really good songs on this album. I love Anthem Part 3. I love Terrified, When We Were Young, Turpentine. But there are a couple skippable songs on here. I find songs like the super short songs, I don't care for them. Childhood, I don't really care for it. You Don't Know What You've Got is very basic, fairly insignificant in my opinion. There's some fat to be trimmed on here. They did add a couple new songs to it briefly after release with Cut Me Off, I think it was called, and Sia. I loved both of those songs. I thought those were great. So, I don't know. There needed to be a little bit of trimming, like I said. But that being said, I'm going to give it a B. I'm going to give it a high B because all things considered, even though the production is really not that great, Travis's drums are super loud. You know, there's a lot of just like muddiness over the whole album. It's very, very loud. There's like almost no dynamic to the album at all. So I have to give it a B. I think it's better than Dogs Eating Dogs because there are some really solid songs on there, but not enough to really get it up to where Take Off Your Pants and Jacket is. So that's it. That's my whole list. I don't think I've forgotten anything. I know there's like the Short Bus EP and maybe like something else, but I don't even really listen to those at all. But I don't even think that's really worth mentioning, really. So let me know what you think. If you think I'm crazy or if you agree, whatever, let me know. And yeah, that's it. Let me know if you want to see other specific bands for tier lists or anything like that, or, you know, maybe anything else, you know, let me know. I'm interested. I'd like to do more of these because I think people would be interested in watching them. So I will see you later. Take care.